Today on Does the Cover Convey What's on the Inside? The answer is no, absolutely not. Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about The Gilded Crown by Marianne. I forgot the author's name, I'm sorry. Today we're talking about The Gilded Crown, a dark adult fantasy about a young woman who can do necromancy. Yeah, it's my favorite. We get to talk about dead bodies. This is the first in a duology called The Raven's Trade. This was requested by my patron, Jess D. And I had never heard of this book before Jess requested it. I think part of why this book is not discussed much by the book community is because the book's cover does not at all convey what's on the inside. This looks like a typical young adult romantasy. That's kind of the cover that young adult romantasies have nowadays, which is fine. That's both a perfectly fine age range and a perfectly fine genre. But I do think that covers should convey what's on the inside more, because you are at risk of not getting your correct audience if you do not do that, which I think is what happened here. The arc of this book did a much better job of conveying what's actually on the inside of this book, and would have been more helpful in helping this book find its particular audience. Based on what's inside, I both can and cannot understand why BOOKTOK in particular hasn't gone feral over this book yet. And what is inside? Well, this hits a bunch of check marks for me in theory, personally. So it's got necromancy, sapphics, personification of death, mommy issues, and mommy issues tied to religious bigotry, and magical animal companions. There are a few things that I very specifically love. One of them is sapphics doing necromancy. Another is my Parade bras, which reminds me that today's sponsor of this video is Parade. Parade is a female-owned, all bodies inclusive brand that makes the only bras that I wear. I'm wearing one right now. I've raved about them for years, even before I worked with them, but I've also recently tried their bodysuit in their Replay line, which is their line made from rescued materials, usually wasted in production processes, that they use to make a buttery, soft product that I want to be buried in. I got these undies that are also from their Replay line, and I am obsessed. This bodysuit is so buttery soft, and it will be perfect under like overalls, but honestly, it's so comfortable. I also wore it to the gym the other day. Parade makes sustainable and affordable bras, underwear, bralettes, and apparel in a variety of sizes, including up to 5X. I am loyal, and so are they. These are the most comfortable bras that I have ever owned. The mesh is like butter soft. It's called silky mesh, but since it's mesh, it's super breathable, so I'm not sweating my literal tits off in Florida. Yes, it's still 85 degrees here, even though it is November. Comfort and not sweating is the priority for me. Give yourself the gift of comfy, non-sweaty titties.
Parade is currently running their Thank You So Much sale from now until November 29th, and then their Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale from November 29th to December 3rd, where you get 30% off.
But my audience gets an even better deal, 50% off, by clicking the link below and using code READS50 at checkout. With Parade's wide variety of styles and colors, you're sure to find a bralette that you will love as much as I love mine. Again, that's READS50 using the link below for 50% off, and thank you so much to Parade for sponsoring today's video. So expectations for this book were very low based on the cover, because this feels like every book, if this cover had a name, it would be Jane Smith. The cover gives you absolutely nothing to go off of, and the title itself is also pretty nothing. In fact, having finished this, I wish it were titled something else because I don't really understand the relevance, but the synopsis was more promising, so I did go into this with a bit of high expectations, and we'll talk about my expectations versus reality. So let me read you the synopsis. The Witch's Heart meets Priory of the Orange Tree. So I have not read either of those, but I have heard from people whose tastes are similar to mine that Priory of the Orange Tree is great. If you've never checked out Emma Skies, you should go check her out. She and I have very similar tastes. So based on that, I had pretty high expectations. I don't know what's in this book that was supposed to be compared to Priory other than sapphics, but if you've read both, please let me know. In this debut novel about a woman who can bring people back from the dead, and the princess and only heir to the throne that she must protect no matter the cost. The first time Helivere visited death, she was 10 years old. Since she was a little girl, Helivere has been able to raise the dead. Every creature can be saved for a price demanded by the shrouded figure who rules the afterlife, who takes a little more from Helivere with each soul she resurrects. Such a gift can rarely remain a secret. When Princess Sullivan, sole heir to the kingdom's throne, is assassinated, the queen summons Helivere to demand she bring her granddaughter back to life, but once is not enough, the killers might strike again. The princess's death would cause a civil war, so the queen commands that Helivere remain by her side, but Sullivan is no easy woman to be bound to, even as Helivere begins to fall in love with her. With the threat of war looming, Helivere must trade more and more of herself to keep the princess alive, but death will always take what he is owed. Because I read a lot of fantasy romance, because I'm so curious, because it gets so popular and I want to know why. What's in there that y'all are loving? This has like a more young adult looking fantasy romance cover. So I, based on those things, thought that I knew the story beats that we would be following. So I had very particular expectations. What I heard from the synopsis was that the princess and Helivir would fall in love. And what I thought it meant by not an easy person to be bound to for Helivir, the princess was difficult to be bound to, was that was more of like a political thing. I didn't think that that was a reflection of who the princess was. So I had the expectation of these two falling in love. Reality was much more complicated. In general, this book was much more than I anticipated it being, and it was very ambitious. This is fantasy. I would not call this romantasy. This is not fantasy romance. It is a fantasy book. There are feelings between Helivir and the princess, but they are mostly on Helivir's side. And again, I would not categorize this as a romance. This is an element of the story, but it is not the story. I was expecting a nice, sweet, kind princess. I don't know why I thought that would happen. The synopsis didn't really explicitly say that. I just misunderstood it. But again, I kept going back to those really typical story beats of what I thought, because I didn't know that this was adult until I went and looked it up mid-reading, because it felt a little more mature in theme and in prose. So I looked it up and it was indeed adult. So I thought that this would be much more along the lines of a young adult sapphic romance fantasy like These Feathered Flames, which I just recently read and have a review up for already, I believe, and Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Colthurst, which is also a sapphic fantasy romance. Instead, it was more like the Never Tilting World, where we're leaning more into darker parts, and the princess is not a good person in this book. She has some good in her, but she is mostly not good, and Helivir finds herself drawn in nonetheless. But to be fair, Helivir is also not what I expected her to be. She is greatly wounded by being ostracized by the community she grew up in, as well as her own families, particularly her mother. She feels very strongly convicted to use her necromancy for good, but there's also a part of her that is like thrilled by this ability to enter death's domain and wants to keep going back. She's very drawn to it. I think that some people were probably hoping that Helivir would fall for death. So there is a man who is the embodiment of death, and he is very enigmatic, very compelling. And while I think there is a connection between them and maybe some sort of attraction, there's definitely chemistry there. I don't necessarily think I can say that the chemistry, the attraction, the connection is romantic or sexual. It's just good chemistry. It's something I can't quite verbalize. So if you're going into this hoping for that relationship between the two of them, you need to manage your expectations. Let me tell you what you can expect from this book. I will do this part without spoilers, and then I'll get into spoilers. So since childhood, Helivir has dealt with two things: her powers and her mother hating her for these powers, because her mother is religious. Her mother came from a different part of the world where a different religion is more accepted. Helivir, her dad, her brother, they do not follow this religion. And so these powers that manifest in Helivir, where at first it manifests as a child where she can talk to animals, her mother sees this as her being able to communicate with dark spirits. And then eventually she is able to bring animals back from the dead. She enters death. She makes a bargain unknowingly as a child to bring back a fox, which was great because any fantasy with a fox in it, you already raised the points in your favor. I think we've established that I'm a big fan of Adventure Fox. So when she does something with her magic, I have to put this so non-spoilery and nondescript. She does something with her magic that her mom cannot look past or move past, to put it lightly. So her family essentially abandons her. They move to the capital. She stays behind in their village to live with this woman, this older woman who brings her up and teaches her about magic and about being an herbalist. So Helivir enters the land of death sometimes and makes bargains with death himself. She finally meets him and he tells her, you have to make a bargain in order to bring back a life. And each time there is a cost. Sometimes it's her hair, sometimes it's her blood, other times a finger. So I love this because I love fantasy books with magic that has to do, magic comes at a price theory, right? I really like actual bargains being made. Bargains with death is very much my thing, especially when we're talking about necromancy and sapphic women doing it. This really just hits all my boxes, doesn't it? So Helivir is not like one of many people entering death and making these bargains. She is seemingly the only person doing this. Her mentor did it only once before. It's very difficult. I genuinely loved how we talked about necromancy in this book as like some sort of commodity, in that it obviously will get used and abused by those in power. Necromancers, the people doing it, will get used and abused. I think in the real world, this absolutely would play out this way. If you like that idea, there's another book that is also sapphic, actually, but it is YA. It's called Song of the Dead by Sarah Glenn Marsh. You should try this if you have already read this, or vice versa, because they do share some similarities. The people in Helavir's village start to find out that she can do necromancy, and this makes her feared and hated, but also she's a commodity. People beg her to help. And every time that she does not or cannot, it comes at a cost. She has to decide who she can save, but not only that, who not to save. And saving people comes at a cost, but also so does not saving people. It comes at the cost of being rejected by the village. The intimidation of the village people only worsens over time, and eventually, after the queen comes and has her resurrect her princess granddaughter, it just gets worse and worse, and then Helavir is requested sometime after from the queen to come to the capital, despite promising not to, but she, can't refuse. It's the queen. So with her raven companion, yay, in tow, she heads to the capital where her family now resides. Her father and brother are happy to see her, but her mother is not, and her mother is so deeply devout to this religion that has, set up in the capital, and now the queen and the princess follow, and they sort of are slowly making it known that they want to erase the other types of belief and be the only church available, including erasing the church that is more accepting of Helavir's abilities and beliefs. And even as I'm describing this to you, I feel like I'm not really doing the story and its characters and its themes justice, but this exceeded my expectations, especially in its portrayal of a mom who keeps you at arm's length because of her religious beliefs. But the world is also just like exactly what I want out of like dark fantasy. It's dreary in a way that really works for me, very similar to how I felt reading The Wolf and the Woodsman, which I don't feel like grabbing, but it's up there somewhere. And I haven't finished this one, but A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft is also dark and dreary in that way that works for me. So Helavir is put in this position where she is forced to work for the crown to bring the princess back whenever she dies. And there is a lot of political scheming going on where they're not sure who, but people are trying to kill the princess. But then again, the princess is also just very reckless because she's a spoiled brat. And yeah, that is frustrating, watching someone fall in love with somebody who's not good. And she sees the small slivers of good in her, but overall, I don't think the audience was supposed to root for Helavir and Sullivan. I think you were supposed to watch this woman fall in love with somebody who is not good. Again, it's not a romance, but that is going to drive some of you up the wall, so it's not going to be the book for everybody. So all of this, her showing up at the capital, having to work and bring the princess back to life, starts this series of events that she can't escape from, that involves her mother's religion, because while the crown follows, this particular religion that even her mom is involved in, the crown has now hired Helavir to bring Sullivan back to life, which is against that same religion. Then there's also Death and his own machinations, political scheming from people who want to see the princess and the queen unseated, and of course there's, those intense feelings for this princess who is really just not good. But many of us have been drawn to people who were not good for us, so I think that that's explored well here, in my opinion. I will say that this book is pretty slowly paced in a way that won't work for many people, but if you like darker fantasy with necromancy and animal companions and mommy issues and death being personified as this enigmatic being and politics being tied to religion, then I highly recommend this one. I think it's worth sticking out the pacing for. It was readable to me nonetheless because I think the prose is good. I was very surprised that this is a debut because it was very well written, in my opinion. I felt so incredibly understood by this book, and not just because it has so many things that are on my favorites list. It didn't just have mommy issues. It has a very nuanced conversation about motherhood, even though the mother is not a main character. Her mom's frustration with her and at times disgust with her hurt, but her mom did love her in a way, and I appreciated seeing that duality and seeing a resentful mom on page rather than just another interpretation of mommy issues that I've seen before, where a mom is distant because they're powerful, which happened in these Feathered Flames, or distant. It's not just distant because religious, it's also distant because she's religious and she's resentful for things that her daughter had done. Her mom had layers that were really painful to peel back, but meant a great deal to me to see on page. So I think that this was incredibly cathartic for me to read. I gave it 5 stars. I hope that you will try it. This is going to be on my favorites of the year list, and I did secure the sequel arc, which is very exciting. All right, I'm not going to be able to do the rest of this without spoilers, so if you are hoping for spoiler free, this is your opportunity to leave before I tell you everything that happens. Okay, so getting getting back into it. So chapter 1, we start with the first time Helivir visited Death, she was 10 years old. Great way to open a book. Death, capital D, we love to see it. And I love when death is actually a place and or a person rather than recently I read Quicksilver and it said he was death and he literally was not in any way, shape, or form death. Actually, I think this might have happened with 2 books I read recently where it was also in that book with the ogre. Like if we're not actually doing death as a personification or a place, I'm not really sure why we're capitalizing it with a D. Like just making a scary man and saying he was death, capital D, please don't. The village where Helivir lived with her parents and brother was on the edge of the forest, which sprawled over most of the northwestern lands of the Kron. Now, we don't really have a good idea of the world that we're in. All I can really think of is the village that we're in and then the city that we end up in. Now, those I will say is very vivid to me, but I'm not sure it's actually necessary for us to like see outside of these 2 places anyway, so that's okay. It didn't ruin my reading experience. Her dad tells her a lot of stories growing up. He told her about the No-Eyed Witch who turned young boys into starlings for her aviary just to hear them sing, about the silver-beaked hawk who tried to fly to the moon, and about the antlered king whose armies had once scorched the land, his smile grisly, with the heart blood of his enemies. The stories kept the cold at bay as it scratched at the door, but sometimes she felt like it was already inside the house in the frost glisten of worry in her father's eyes. That's just good writing. That's just good writing. The antlered king is going to be important later. So the antlered king is also death. It's a little complicated, but the guy who is like sort of the caretaker of the waiting place, it's sort of like a Ember in the Ashes type deal going on, where there's a death waiting place before you move on to ultimate death 2.0, right? And that guy that we're going to meet is also, come to find out, the Antlered King. And book 2 is called The Antlered King. So I'm interested to see what we're doing with that. I think that's really fascinating. That's a similar thing that happens in one of my favorite book series is An Ember in the Ashes, and where there's a waiting place and somebody is sort of the personification of death, sort of like a Grim Reaper type. So that happens here. It happens in Ember. So leave me more books like that if you have any down below. So she accidentally went into death as a child to try to bring back, I believe, a fox. It's this like secondary place, right? It's not somewhere where there's like a door. She like projects her consciousness. And this is something she did the first time at 10 years old as a child because she was very sad about a fox that had died. So she brings the fox back to life, but her brother instantly, and not in a mean way, kills it and is like, oh, now we have food for a couple of days. And she is distraught over this. The second time Helivir visits death, she's 12 years old. Now, at 12 years old, she is regularly talking to animals, like a magpie who tries to steal her father's knife. Now, I love when we're talking to animals, particularly birds. She does end up getting a crow best friend, animal companion, which I am just an absolute sucker for. And so she tries to like keep this under wraps that she's talking to this magpie and trying to trade it rowan berries for a knife, and magpie's like, well, I can't eat rowan berries, what else you got? It's very cute. It's very if I had magic at 12, that's how I would be. But she's not supposed to be talking to birds, so when her father catches her, she's like, please don't tell mom. And her dad explains, do you know where your mother is from? In the Galgoros, they have a different way of doing things. The 12-pointed star carved into the lintel above our door? Your ma carved that. It's from the Galgoros. It's a symbol of their god. Onistus, god of the promise. So we get introduced very early on that her mom is from a different place that has a different religious idea than her dad does. Her single god may seem odd to you and me, but many things seem odd just because we don't understand them. It doesn't mean they're wrong. Our way is odd to her too. She doesn't understand that we do things differently. So this is a point of contention for her whole family, but Helivir really bears the brunt of it. And so begins the mommy issues, because her mom doesn't understand that for Helivir to be seeing things or talking to things that people don't normally talk to, like animals, her mom sees it as something harmful when in fact it's just very normal to Helivir. But her mom thinks of it as she's talking to dark entities. Suddenly she felt quite distant from her ma, as if she'd always assumed they were looking through the same telescope. Her ma's was trained somewhere completely different, watching a landscape Helivir couldn't hope to see. It's just good writing. It's just good. Her dad gives her like this lion pendant, and he's like, this was from our family. You should keep it on you to remember that there are always others like you. So her mother becomes pregnant. It's just the 4 of them, and then her mother becomes pregnant, and she goes into childbirth, and it goes poorly and her mom and the baby both die, which was a little rough for me, but I handled it. Thank you. And Milandra, the old woman who eventually she's going to live with, her dad talks to Milandra and says, you can bring her back. And Milandra is like, if I couldn't keep her alive during, what makes you think I could bring her back? So they're going to prepare the death rites, but Piper, the mother, is of the Eastern faith, and so they have to prepare like very specific rites. And so they're supposed to go fetch a peer, a particular kind of religious person, like a father sort of, from the next temple. So this is going to take time to do the death rites in the religious way that her mother would have wanted, right? So Helivir decides that she wants to try going back into death. She knows that she's been there before, and she wants to do what Milandra had done, what her dad was asking Milandra to do. And she goes and talks to the fire in the hearth, which I just love. I just loved it. It reminded me of The Bear and the Nightingale in a lot of ways, this book did. So she goes and talks to the hearth and she's like, I want to try. And the fire's like, all right, go for it then. And you're supposed to like thank the fire when it burns well for you. And she's like, well, my parents wouldn't know that. That's something I know. And I just love how much like knowledge she has on these sentient beings that, her mom won't even acknowledge exist. That's very Bear and the Nightingale, actually. That's a lot that's a very specific parallel to come to think of it, because the main character in The Bear and the Nightingale is going through the same thing where, wow, I can't believe you're watching this in real time, me realize that very specific parallel. The main character can talk to entities that her stepmother, in the case of The Bear and the Nightingale, does not want to acknowledge exists. And then there's a lot of like religious issues that come up in The Bear and the Nightingale, to put it lightly. So she asks the fire, what if I can't do it? And the fire says, well, the outcome can't be any worse if you can't do it. Will you come with me? I cannot leave your homestead, you know this. The burnt creature rolled a hot coal towards her across the ash. A tongue of flame licked around it. It'll be dark, it said. It sends her with a hot coal to go into death with. I love this. So she goes into death, and a voice says to her, you're a little lively to be out here. Leaning against a tree was a man of black. His hair was black, his coat was black, his gloves were black, an absolute black, as if no light could reflect from it. Now, I will say that normally I get annoyed about this, but I'm getting annoyed about it in books where it feels like a shortcut to make a man sexy. Here, it's not doing that. It's not a shortcut to make a man sexy. He is the embodiment of death. He is nothing other than darkness. He doesn't just like wear black clothes and tear up his room in the case of Quicksilver. And he's like unsettling from the jump. He took a deep breath as if he smelled something sweet. Oh no, you do not belong here. Not yet. Not for a long while yet. His voice was low and warm, the only warm thing about him. She says, I'm looking for my mother. And why do you think she'd be here? She's dead. So you do know where you are. I did wonder, but then again, it's not your first time here, is it? Your mother's right over there. Your sister too. So her mom and her sister are there. And she's like, so I brought a fox back years ago. I want my mom to come back with me, just like I brought the fox back. And he says, and what will you give me in return? I don't have anything. What a pity. Why do I have to give you something? You can't take from this place without leaving the price. For natural deaths especially, there is a cost. And he sees that she has a coal with her that she put in the coal that the fire gave her, she had put into a lantern. And he says, that will go part of the way in striking a balance. The coal is not mine. I can't give it to you. And I didn't know that's how it worked. You left the berries for your fox and a drop of your blood too. He's like, I thought you were good at this. I thought you knew. He's like, here's how it works. Something from life that is full of life and another blood gift. If you want your mom to be happy with you, safe, grow old, go home, then what you'll need to do is give the coal and a small blood gift. So she asks him, who are you? And he says, if you come here again, you can ask me again. And he says this every single time. And sometimes I was like, just say it. And then other times I was like, no, don't tell me. So when she gets to her mother and sister in death, her mom is holding her baby sister and her mom seems fine. And he says, it's one or the other. You can't take both. And she says, why not? And he says, because of things much older than me. So he's not ultimately in control here. He's more of a caretaker. And she says, okay, I want to take my mother then. And so he takes the baby and he tells her mother, you can go and be with your living daughter. I will take care of her until you return. He's not actually taking care of her. She goes to the death beyond, death 2.0. So they return. Her mother comes back to life, and immediately her mom knows what happened and hates her for it. She shoves her away and curses her. Not in like a magic way. She says, curse you. Basically, fuck off. The third time Helivere entered death, she was 22 years old. This time she went prepared. She and Melandra lived together as hedge witches in the village. Her family sent her to live with her not long after she raised her mother from the dead. Her mom never really liked living in the village by the woods anyway, and then after losing her child, nothing could convince her to stay. Now, did this scene sort of devastate me? Yes, but I was okay. It was described as a miscarriage. She is heartbroken. She does not get over it. Was it painful? Yes, it was. I don't do well with that, but I was okay here. But if you have miscarriage trauma, I would be careful watching or reading this. So Melandra offered to care for Helivere, and she is raising Helivere, teaching her the arts of healing and herbalism. And her family moved to Rochedane, which is the capital. One day, an entourage, a royal entourage shows up, and they're like, this is the princess and she has been poisoned. We're not here to have you identify the toxin. We're here to have you, Melandra specifically, raise her from the dead. Because nobody knows at this point that Helivere also does this. Melandra has done this once previously. And Melandra's like, I can't do it. I've never been able to do it more than the one time that I did it. So they're all disappointed, and Helivere says, I can do it. And Melandra's like, Don't tell them. They'll take you away, order you to raise every sickly relative they have, every fallen soldier. They have the power to make you. Don't do this for your own sake. And Helivere says, well, this girl is my age and I wouldn't want to be dead either. She's just like she's just a good person, and not in a Mary Sue kind of way. She just has this immense amount of power and wants very deeply to do right and also be loved. And that is a lethal combination that ends in nothing but heartbreak for Helivere. But also it talks about how she is very pulled to go back to death, which is very compelling from a reader's perspective. It was as if she were about to start a race which she knew she could win if she only pushed herself hard enough. Every day she'd raised her mother, she'd felt the pull of it, had waited with breath held for the opportunity to see if she could do it again. That's fucking cool. So she says to the queen, if I succeed, you have to promise that you're not going to make me do this again. You or anyone else from your court, you let me stay here. She wants to stay in the village. And the queen inclines her head and, agrees, but then obviously goes back on this later. So since the princess's death was not natural, the bargain is a little bit different, which I find so interesting. I love fantasy books with bargains in general. I've never gotten a chance to make a review of this, but The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk is really fun and has a lot to do with like bargains, and it's a little bit feminist and it's cute. So Death says, all right, we can make a fair bargain. She was poisoned. She actually asks Death, okay, can you tell me who poisoned this princess? And Death won't answer any of her questions. But he's Death. He's enigmatic. He does remark on how easy it is for her to come into the realm of death, which is fascinating. And it says that she wonders if she is the only soul that he could talk to, and if others pay him visits at all, and if he actually holds any conversations with the dead or just ferries them to wherever they go. He tells her, if you're going to keep coming back here, there are things in life that are precious in a place like this, treasures. Bring them to me whenever you seek the dead and I'll make you a fair trade. I'm only going to demand, treasures and a few drops of blood at a time. And she's like, do you call this a few drops of blood? Because my finger's gone. Although in death, her finger is still there, and he has to explain to her, well, in death, you're whole, but yes, back at home, your finger will be gone. She says, I don't understand the rules. And he says, well, it's not a game. There are no rules, not in a place like this, only laws. What sort of things do you want me to bring you? She asks. Particular things that someone like you will be able to find. Someone like me. Yes, someone who sees things the way that you seem to be able to see them. So this is a case where Helivere seems to be the special, but this is a case where it actually works for me. Especially because in this book, it says that this realization that she is able to find certain things that allow her to commune with death, to go to death, to bring people back from death, makes her special rather than Disgusting. Who she was had turned her mother's gaze dark and glowering even before Helivir had raised her. Who she was has been like such a condemnation in her life, so now being in death and feeling like she has value is super meaningful for her. He can't outright say the things in like life that he is looking for that will allow her to be like bargaining chips that she can, use to bring back from the dead. But what he can do is write her riddles that will tell her where to go. So he writes her a riddle, says, I am restricted. I cannot tell you exactly where to look. The signs will make themselves known to you. She asks, okay, why do you need these particular things from life? Of course, he doesn't answer any questions because he's enigmatic. He does tell her that the poison has wreaked havoc on the princess's body and he will need more than a few drops of blood. The law of this place dictates it. Hereafter, the things you bring me will be enough. So he takes seeds and a lock of hair. The finger she had to cut off in order to get her mom back, I believe, or get into death, I forget. I wasn't clear in my notes. So she has to bargain with a lock of her hair. He sees the lion pendant that she's wearing that her father gave her, and he is very curious about it. She's like, is this what I need to bargain with? And he says, no, you keep your trinket. It is too steeped in blood. This would earn you legions, 100 lives, if I were willing to take it. And once again, she asks, who are you? And he says, if you come here again, you can ask me again. Does that mean you'll never tell me? It means I'll never promise an answer. It depends on how long we carry on our trade. I love this dynamic. She finds the princess in death. She brings her back, and her grandmother is ecstatic. She says, again, please do not make me do this more than once. Such things cannot become a commodity. You have my word. None from our court will trouble you for such services again. The court is in your debt, however. I am in your debt. If you ever need our help, send a messenger. But yeah, they basically immediately go back on their word. They ask her what is in death, and she says, well, the place that I go, I believe, is a stepping stone to whatever is beyond. And I don't know what comes after any more than you do. She reads over the riddle. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it for yourself if you want to. I'm not going to recite every riddle to you. Imagine if I sat here like reading out every song from The Hobbit. Good God. She goes over it, and it's not immediately clear like what it's about, but we find out later that it is a weeping willow, or it's referencing a weeping willow. She talks to Melandra, and she says, did you know that death has pockets? Why would death need pockets? And Melandra's like, do you have a fever? I thought that was really cute. She starts to realize that going and doing this, despite her pull to do it, her like moral pull to do it, and also just this like, it's like she said, like it's knowing that you are going to win a race as you enter it. Like she's good at this. She knows it and she likes doing it, makes her feel good about herself. It's something that like she's uniquely capable of. And now knowing that how unique she is, she's even more drawn to it to sort of like assuage that guilt that her mom instilled in her that you're bad, you're evil. But talking to Melandra, she does wonder about, what have I given in a single finger? Something was gone just as there had been something missing the first 2 times, but now it's something deeper. So she's noticing that she's giving away pieces of herself. And this is only going to get worse, which I love. I love when magic comes with a price, and I especially love when necromancy comes with a price. But talking to Melandra about death, the entity, rather than just death, the place, she says, you're wondering why this man in black talks to you when he has never shown himself to me in all the times I've gone to that place. So Melandra can enter, but she's only ever brought one person back. I wonder if it is because he seems to be as an opportunity, Helivir says, an idiot he can trick into doing this work in the living world. And Melandra cautions her, saying, it's best that you don't spend your life giving away parts of yourself for strangers' death, or soon you won't have anything left. People in the village do find out about what Helivir can do, despite the fact that they did not say anything about it. Helivir and Melandra did not say anything about it. Gee, I wonder who told. And so she starts to get a lot of shit from the village people who are like, well, it's hard to be happy when you could have brought my husband back. And Helivir, questions the morality of not doing something, right? Perhaps it should be my job. If I can do something, surely I should. No one would need to die at all. And Melandra's like, no, death is an eventuality, not just a probability. You should spend your time making sure you grant full lives where they are cut off too soon. Bring back those who were lost before their time. If you're going to do this, then bring back those who were lost before they should have died. But also, if you give too much away, then there will be nothing left to save others. So you will have to choose wisely. And Helivir hates that she has to make choices at all. People show up at the gate to their home where they live together. At their front door, these people have left a raven where they broke its neck. Oh, not a crow, a raven. A raven where they broke broke its neck and adorned its neck with hemlock. And even without thinking about it, Helivir is so horrified by this that the village people would do this, as like a message to her. She immediately enters death and wants to bargain for this one particular raven. And this is the first time that she enters without having to be asleep first, which is fascinating. And Death is angry with her because he's like, Death is not your plaything. It is not your garden to idly pluck what grows there. Do you understand? She says, no, this isn't a game and there are no rules. She tries to just sort of like snatch the raven back from Death rather than making a bargain. If you ever snatch from my realm as you did, I will bite the hand from your arm and the arm from your shoulder. Do you understand? It was at this moment I was sure it was not a romance between the two of them. And I'm really glad it wasn't, because I love the chemistry here and I wanted it to remain the way that it was, where it was just this really hard to understand entity versus this very mortal girl who never should have crossed paths with such an entity, but has nonetheless. I do not need this to end in sex. I need it to stay where it is. Sex is fine, but sometimes I just want a sort of platonic thing. So she brings this raven back and its name is Elsevier, and now it stays with her. It is her companion. She gets a letter from the princess who demands her presence in Rochedane. Melandra cannot go with her. Melandra is going to stay behind, which was very sad. I loved Melandra. But the raven's coming, Elsevier's coming, so that's good. She goes back to her family's house to say goodbye to the hearth, which I actually found quite sad. Like, this was the last thing tying her to her home. You do not need to keep coming to wake me, it said. Don't you want me to? I do, and I always will, but you do not need to. Even if I am sleeping, it is no bad thing. I do not mind it. I love fire as an entity. I love this. I feel I should, after what you gave me to bring back Ma. The coal was yours, a part of you. I had no right to give it away, no matter what it was for, she tells the fire. I love how much she deeply cares for these non-human entities. Again, it's very like Vazia from The Bear and the Nightingale. Her and Melandra talk about a little bit about the history of their, political dynamics before she leaves. There was a war that the queen, who is currently the queen, the princess's grandma, won, called the War of the Waves. When the queen won, she changed her emblem from a lion to a type of ship used for trade and warfare. Wait, I'm not sure if it was the same queen. And you know what? This political stuff, like the stuff with the Antler King, the War of the Waves, it was not as potent in the story that as I was hoping it would be. I still love the book, but I wish that had been more of a hit for me. Before she leaves, Melandra gives her a basket with a pestle and mortar, linens, bottles, all kinds of things from their workshop so that she can continue to do herbalist work in Rochedane, even though she's obviously going to do mostly necromancy. They know what's coming. She finally gets to meet back up with her family, her brother, her dad, and she learns that her mom mostly spends time at the temple because her mom, as we learned previously, came from another part of the world that worships the god Onistus, the god of the promise. On the one hand, Helivir felt she knew next to nothing about Onistian, as in the faith. Okay, Onistian, and was upset her mother hadn't tried to share it with her or Farver, her brother. On the other hand, what Helivir knew about the afterlife conflicted completely with what the Onistian faith preached. And that must be deeply upsetting for her mom, who also probably remembers coming back from the dead and not seeing Onistus there. So the Onistian faith is sort of spreading in the city of Rochedane. It's minor in the beginning, but it's sort of in conflict with another religious belief called the Order of the Nightingale. She does see her mother, and her mother is with the peer, the father basically, of the Onistian church that she hangs out with at temple. And her mom is very standoffish to her even now, and the peer is like, you should come to temple, Helivir. Don't do it, Helivir. Boo, hiss. Helivir actually ends up going to the Order of the Nightingale. She feels drawn there. The reason is because of part of the riddle, and she goes and she's like, I was told to look for a weeping woman. That was part of the riddle. And the woman at the Order of the Nightingale says, do you mean the weeping willow? There is a willow at this temple of the Order of the Nightingale that is the heart of the city. The city was built around it, and the order protects it. We are the heart of the city, its firmest foundation, and talking about the Onistian faith, in the end, I don't believe a new faith can threaten that. She goes and talks to the weeping willow that normally does not talk to other people, and it tells her, you are missing parts. Where have they gone? Helivir says, I traded them for souls. I brought them back from death. I know death. As a seed, I was watered by blood. My roots still feed on the memories. Do you know why I woke you? Helivir says, I suppose you don't want to be missing any more of those parts. You might start to feel cold. So Helivir needs like very particular things from life in order to not cut pieces off of herself to enter death. That's it. Helivir woke this weeping willow by trading it a new song, one that the Order of the Nightingale doesn't normally sing. And and it gives her seeds in order to trade with death to enter death. Talking with the Order of the Nightingale, they said that they sing, and some of us sing to things most people would say aren't there, but we always pretend it's in prayer so they don't call us mad. So this is a group that gets treated poorly by the Onistian faith, similarly to how Helivir was treated very poorly by her mother of the Onistian faith. And thinking of her mother's treatment of her, she thinks of it as like a coldness that Helivir felt every time her mother looked at her, spoke to her. Helivir had long since resigned herself to it, but now something ached in her, wishing things could be like they were today, where her mom had helped her figure out a new dress. She's very happy to like have this conversation with her mom, but you know, she's getting ready to go to the palace, and then her bird Elsevier lands on her shoulder, and her mom's like, don't let that bird touch the strings on your dress, it'll pull the threads. And Helivir says he, and her mom says oh, and the illusion was broken just like that. Her brother is a squire to a knight, and her brother, just like Helivir, is gay, which I was so excited about. I hate to tell you this, but it ends in complete and utter fucking tragedy, which I should have seen coming. I honestly thought that her brother's knight boyfriend was the bad guy. He wasn't the bad guy. What he is dead. It was terrible. Her brother is really nice, and I really appreciate like strong sibling bonds, and this is one of them, although it does go downhill because of the necromancy stuff later. But her brother does know that she is a necromancer, and she thought that this was like a secret the whole time, but he knew that she brought their mom back from the dead, and she always felt sort of lonely about this, and now is feeling like an even stronger kinship with her brother, which I thought was very beautiful. And she explains, like, I lost my fingers entering death. I lost one for mom and one for the princess. She does go and talk to the princess, who immediately was not what I thought she would be. She's like, oh, call me Sullivan. After all, you did bring me back from the dead. It should make things a little less prim, don't you think? And she's like, I want the full story. That's why you're here. I want the full story. I want to know how you did it. And Helivir is very confused. She's like, you brought me here to ask how I brought you back from the dead? Yes, every detail. She's like, well, I had to make a bargain, a finger, and a lock of my hair. And also I have to bring something from life, and for you it was 3 dandelion seeds. And Sullivan says, but is that all? A finger and some hair? Are souls usually so cheap? And I'm like, oh, you're a bitch. Oh, you are rude. It just seems little for a whole life. So how does it work? And she's asking these questions because she's like, she's going to force Helivir to stay there. I want you here to make sure that I won't be left for dead. She spoke as if she had rehearsed the lines. So there's something about her that is spoiled and awful, but also a part of her that does give a shit. She contains multitudes, right? She has to be spoiled and shitty because that's who her grandmother raised her to be, but also she has a little piece inside of her that she sometimes lets be shown that, you know, it does give a shit, but she is not a good person. And again, this is not a romance. Your grandmother made me a promise that no one from the court would ask me to raise the dead again. The promise covers my grandmother's court, the princess said. I have my own, or I will in the not too distant future. For the time being, I am not a part of it. If grandmama dies without a successor, civil war will be inescapable, with all the houses falling over each other for the crown. And you can't just stay in the village because it will take you too long to get here. If I'm attacked again, the longer I'm dead, the longer people would have to know it and to use it. They don't want anyone to know that she's been getting brought back from the dead, especially because these people, the queen and the princess, worship Onistus. So she says, you're going to be my herbalist. I'll give you a little pass so that you can access the palace whenever you need to. The idea is that you'll be my herbalist, but really you will be my necromancer. And Helivir's like, okay, so I have like the seeds from the tree, so if I need to, I could go back this one time, but if there's a time after that, like how many pieces of myself am I going to have to cut off in order to enter death and then further make bargain? And she immediately regrets ever raising this princess from the dead. She should have left the princess as she'd found her, civil war be damned. But when she remembered her bloated corpse, the pallor of her skin, so very different to the golden-haired woman of today, so graceful as she fought and so full of life it shone from her, Helivir could only feel glad she hadn't. She is immediately attracted to this woman. And listen, I can't blame her. We have all been attracted to really shitty people. She starts to learn more about her mother's beliefs, trying to understand like why the Onistian faith is so dead set that her abilities to speak with animals and, under other sentient things that are, non-human entities are wrong. She comes across like a book about this, and it says they were depictions, the book said, of dark things made of lies, intent on pulling men and women, into darkness. It didn't explain what the evils were, whether they were just metaphors for temptation. Perhaps this was why Ma had always hated her talking to the fire as a child, to the trees. She thought her daughter was talking to evil things, dark things. There is an investigation going on as to who poisoned the princess in the first place and successfully killed her the first time. And it's sad because Helivir seems to be trying to take on more of an investigation angle than the queen and the princess are. Everything to them is like how things look. They don't want their rule to be questioned. They don't want anyone, falling into civil war. They don't want the houses trying to compete to gain the, foothold of power. At one point, she is with her family, and the woman from the Order of the Nightingale shows up and says, I need you to come back with me. There was a boy hurt in a duel. And her mom says, so you're going to do it again? It ruins lives. It ruined our lives. It's an unnatural thing. It's flying in the face of what's proper. And Helivir's like, how the fuck was your life ruined? I brought you back. But obviously, you can tell without it being said that her mom had to leave the baby behind, right? And that ruined her future in her POV. And like, I get that. I get your life being tainted after that. And I think that both things can be true at once, where you can love someone and hate them for doing something that you feel like ruined your life. I'm not saying it's good, I'm saying I understand it. So now that there's a life that needs to be taken back from the dead, she's like, well, I have no choice either to cut a piece off of myself or to use the seeds that I got from that tree, which means I'll have to ask death for another riddle to find another thing from life that I can take and use to bargain with. And the only reason she's doing this is because she feels like this person who died, a boy, is not a young boy. He is a young adult, and he is part of the noble houses. And she's like, I could use this guy to try to find information. And the information that she ends up getting from this guy is like, yeah, it's helpful, but it's pretty minor. She does get another riddle from death, though, so that means that she will be able to move on to finding another thing from life that will be able to be used as a bargaining piece in case or when the princess gets murdered yet again. She gets in another argument with her mom about doing this. You can't keep doing this, her ma snapped. It's not natural. I'm not sure it's unnatural, Helivir said. Death doesn't seem to mind. Her ma winced as if she hated to hear names given to the formless evil that her daughter was communing with. It's against the natural order. It flies in the face of Onistus. You're stopping people from being given his promise when he sees fit to bring them to it. You're putting their eternal souls in jeopardy. Ma, I don't believe in your ways. Fine, her ma snapped. Whether you believe in them or not, you're playing with things that you don't understand, little girl. Do you think it's just drops of blood I give? It's parts of me that are taken, parts of my soul. I can feel it. I gave a part of my soul for you. And her mom says, you ruined our lives. You keep saying that. Look around you. You're alive. You're in a good home. You found your religion. I saved you from an early grave. What more do you want? You didn't save me at all, her mom says. You just made your own life easier. Lives are always easier when your mother's there, your wife, to take care of you all. You threw her away so you wouldn't have to handle a harder life. She was part of my soul, and you threw her away. Oh, wow, that hurts, actually. No! Talking about the baby that was lost. I was 12 years old, Helivir said. I had the option to save you, so I did. I didn't think beyond the simple fact that I wanted you back. Her ma said, I'd made the choice already. It was not yours to make. Helivir says, I'm sorry I couldn't bring her back too. I did try. Death wouldn't let me. I had to choose, and I choose you. Then death is an evil thing, her mother said. Are you certain you want to be dealing with such an evil thing? I'm trying to be careful to pick the ones who have died too soon, who haven't had their lives. Her mom shrugs her off, and her heart breaks, and it says, one's like your sister, which is just it. Oh, it killed me. So it just killed me. It killed me. Having another conversation with Princess Solovane, she explains, I am a finite thing and I don't want to be raising you over and over when I have to cut off pieces of me and I lose pieces of my soul. Like, it's not just literal, it's also figurative. I am losing pieces of my soul, bringing you back to life. And the princess is like, oh, then why did you raise that boy? Shouldn't you be saving yourself for me? I didn't come to Roshadane to make a commodity of myself. I came because you summoned me. The gruesome boy had died, and I could do something about it. It was as simple as that. I didn't do it lightly, Solovane. It's not just my body, it's a part of my soul. A part of your soul? How romantic, Solovane said. I suppose I should be jealous then that other people have parts of your soul as well as me? And are you jealous? Helivir says. If you are so finite, why should I let you waste yourself on some boy? Oh my god, you know what I just realized? She's mean and awful, but like, if this were a guy saying it, I feel like if this were a man, people would have liked this book. So Helivir is still trying to figure out what happened. says, everyone seems to think only a noble would stand to gain from your death. And if it was a noble, wouldn't they kill all who were at the table unless they were there themselves? Don't all the houses hate each other? And Sullivan's like, you're going to muddy the waters when we're trying to investigate ourselves. If she found out that you were trying to play detective, she would not be pleased. Helivir's like, you don't want me to help? Like, I feel like this is the right way to go about things, is investigating who's trying to kill you so that they can't do it anymore, rather than me just raising you from the dead over and over and over. But they see her as so expendable that they're like, well, why not do it that way? She starts to feel like the peer her mother is affiliated with at the church is very dark and also suspicious of her. And at one point she's actually talking to a cat at her mom's house, which adorable. And her mom catches her and she says, the peer was right about you. You're too far gone. Tomorrow I want you to leave. Go and stay at the order. Her father hates this. He hates that her mom is like this, but he feels like he can't do much about it. And of course, as we all do, when one of our parents is sort of passive about another parent treating us like shit, she says she quelled the part of her heart that asked why he wasn't doing more to make her stay, why she was being cast out instead of her mother. She goes and stays at the Order of the Nightingale. On one hand, she's like, I feel at peace here because, I can be who I am. But on the other hand, there is a hole in my heart for, where my family should be. I feel like I've been talking forever. So I'm kind of going to wrap this up a little bit and just point out the things that I liked and explain why I thought that the ending was a little bit lackluster. So she continues to go look for these pieces of life. The next one is like oysters, and she uses them whenever Helivir needs to come back. But not when Helivir needs to come back, when Sullivan needs to come back. The Queen and Sullivan start making her bring back people that they have tortured in order for them to question further. And she hates this. So she's constantly in this place where she's having to bring back these people and bring back Sullivan. And she can't keep up with, having to find these pieces of life. She's also balancing her mom's religious beliefs and the peer becoming very suspicious of her, the peer being very suspicious of the fact that he keeps hearing that stuff is happening to Sullivan, but then Sullivan's magically fine and Helivir just happens to be there, the herbalist. Her brother's boyfriend, Calgear, the knight, who's part of a noble family, he gets blamed for the poisoning, and unfortunately Calgear gets executed. And the plan was to bring him back to life, but the queen knew that and she burned Calgear's body. This absolutely ruins Helivir's relationship with her brother Farver, because he's like, you keep bringing the princess back, but you couldn't bring back my boyfriend. And she's like, they burned his body. There was nothing I could do. And he's like, I can't even look at you. Like, you keep bringing her back regardless. And she is a bad person, but there is something drawing her to Sullivan over and over and over again. And again, this is a very broken and isolated person. So I can understand wanting to see the small good in somebody who is, seemingly bad. She is seen as seemingly bad by her mom, and, she tries to find the good in what she's doing. I get it. I'm really glad that this did not end with a romance between the two. In the end, she realizes that Death is also the antlered king who was a real person. And in the end, Sullivan has become reckless and is doing dangerous things like riding wild horses until she falls and breaks her neck. And then when Helivir brings her back, she says, well, I'm going to go get back on that horse again. And Helivir's like, you did it. You commodified me, and I'm just supposed to sit here and give away parts of my soul so that you can do reckless bullshit. And in the end, her mom says, I was afraid for you, and also I hate, what you are, but also I was afraid for you because of the peer. She finds out that there's a long history of the Onistian faith oppressing and sometimes murdering people who behave as Helivir does, who have these inclinations to talk to things that are like these non-human sentient entities. And so she's trying very hard to stay away from the Onistian faith, but they are starting to take over. And in the end, once they've, figured out who's trying to kill whom, and her brother has cut her off essentially, Sullivan knows and is sort of regretful about everything that's happened, kind of, in a way, not in a great way, but in a way. And she knows that Helivir is leaving, and Helivir plans to leave. And the next book is called The Antlered King, so I'm guessing we'll learn a little bit about, the history with the Antlered King and how that ties into Helivir, having this, lion trinket, and that has to do with previous queens and things like that. So I think we'll get a little bit more of the politics and stuff and the previous administration. Is that the right word? But I just was hoping for a little bit more of an explosive ending. I love this book nonetheless for everything it did leading up to it, and I really love the conversations that we were having about her and her mom and how deeply wounded her mom was. The mommy issues here is just peak. It's so good. I love things with riddles and bargains and death, and this really hit all those notes for me. And I definitely want to read the next one. I did get an ARC from the publisher of the next one, so I'll definitely continue. But I just wish that this had broken my heart in the end, beyond her and her brother not having a relationship anymore because of what happened with his boyfriend. And I really, really appreciate that it did not end in a romance. Now, maybe there's some sort of chemistry that maybe might lean into her being into death, but I think she's a lesbian. I don't know. It's never really stated exactly. And Sullivan would have to do a whole hell of a lot of work in order for Helivir to like actually be with her, I would think. I think that was just going to show like sometimes we are attracted to people who are terrible. And it did a really good job talking about that. So if you love mommy issues and necromancy and you like your books a little bit dark and dreary, and also talking about religious stuff tied to the mommy issues and magical animal companions, this is the book for you. If you read this, let me know how you felt about the ending being a little bit lackluster, because I really think it was. But I'm still just, and the writing was so good. Like I was really eating it up every bite. It's sort of like, you know, when you eat a pie and the top is so good and the filling is so good and then the crust doesn't have salt in it and you're like, oh, if this just had a little pinch of salt in it, this would be the most perfect thing I've ever eaten. This reminds me that I have to order pie for Thanksgiving. Like fuck Thanksgiving, obviously, but there's a place near me that makes marshmallow pumpkin pie only one time of year. And so I'm gonna order it because that is what I will be eating on Thanksgiving. If Thanksgiving's gonna exist, it's only gonna exist to be a day that I eat the fucking marshmallow pumpkin pie. Anyway, all this to say, it didn't have salt in the crust. If you made it this far, leave an emoji for what you wish was your magical animal companion down below. Or leave a crow for Elsevier, because we love him so much. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astra, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Cami, Choco's traumatized by that dang book, Chris the horror therapist, DJ Rocktopus, EK Casey, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, Hey Mom I'm Famous, Jess, John E, Kay, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Max B, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, Ree, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph, T Delegati, 2 Orbit, Umami Mommy, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, Zorvictia, Chai Guy. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And I have to say thank you for being a friend to my potato starch Marxist patrons. Wow, that's a mouthful. And those are AB Daniels Anaki, Alejandra, Ali Oxenfree, Alistair Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Armadildo. That's a good one. Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe Lavender, Bookish Brainrot, Bookish by Jenna, Bree Caitlin, Kate B, Caitlin P, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate, Catherine, Kathy, Claire Online, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle M, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorian, Dorothea, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Other Emma, Ezra Moon, Fiona McDonald, Forever a Boat, Francis Gadarn, Galaxy Bot, Halia Artisan, Hannah Bunny, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, JM Tennant, Jays on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kat, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Luciri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marcella, Marquita, Megan, Malara, May, Mima Who, Molly, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Paul, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Secoria, Saint Bringer, Saki Alume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sean, Sophie, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Wobbs. If you don't tell me how to say that, I'm gonna cry. And Writer A, thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.